Okay, so we have this cool looking heat map. I like it, it looks good. I want to do a few more finishing touches to this just to make it a lot more exciting to look at. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this heat map here and I'm going to cut contours from it. You can actually cut contours from a heat map. It's basically the same thing as a terrain map. You just go to the Spatial Analyst toolbar or the 3D Analyst toolbar. You go to the where is it? Surface, sorry, contour. And the input raster, you bring in that heat map that you just made, drag into the raster image here. I'm just going to leave this as is. As I mentioned in the previous tutorial, generally I think it works the best if you leave the default output as the default geodatabase. The contour interval, if you look at this range here, I'm going to make it 0.1. So every 10%, I want to see like, this is where LeBron James shoots 10% from the field. Here's where LeBron James shoots 20% from the field, et cetera, et cetera. So these lines will be very useful for me for that sense. And that's it. That's all we need. So just click OK. And this should work. I hope. There we go. Now you see that there is this huge range of rings right here near the basket. Now the average percentage near the basket for most NBA players is around 60% to 100%. Basically, when you're right next to the basket, you are basically guaranteed to put into the bucket unless there's a huge center ready to block your shot. So that's why that explains that huge discrepancy of range of values is this little range here. But outside of that, it's okay. I'm going to go to the Properties tab here, and I'm going to go to the Categories tab, and I'm going to visualize it by the contour. Not the Quantities tab, the Categories tab, and I'll explain why in a second. Add all values, and you see it's going to visualize it by 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. But everywhere basically above, let's say 100%, these are all just extraneous values. And you see, if you look at the count on the side here, this little count button, these are just like ones. They're just anomalies. We want to keep where the actual range of values, which is right here, these are the ones we want to focus on. Shift select these guys and remove values. Now we only have 0 to 90%. Uncheck this box here, and that's going to not show those guys, and you click apply. Now those circles in the middle are gone because we don't need that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick a color ramp. Let's say this guy here. And so it's going to do the 0 to 90 as that color ramp. Click apply. And now this is a nice looking heat map here. Maybe let's visualize that 50% line, which is LeBron James' average, with a nice dash, for instance, like that. Give it a thicker line like that. Click apply. And now, in a sense, you're visualizing LeBron James' favorite spots from the three-point line. Obviously, he likes to work around the basket. Okay? So that's a good way to visualize contour information. You combine that with the shot chart. This is a pretty cool looking diagram. But I want to take it further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one more heat map. LeBron shots. I'm going to go back to my bookmark with the shot chart because I want to have the same extents of the previous one. Go to kernel density. Kernel density. Bring in the point data set there. In the population field, I'm not going to do anything. Why? Because I want to visualize this by now, literally, where did he take shots, regardless if he made them or if he missed them. So 1 as my cell size, 30 as my radius. Click OK. Let it do its thing. I'm going to do the same exact process where I took this and I classified it using the linear interpolation, symbology, go to the classification tab here. Actually, let's do go to the stretch values tab. You can do this too. This will also represent a heat map, but this is a bit more. This is the arithmetic map that I showed you guys previously, where it's a nice continuous gradient there. Okay. Click OK. This is good enough for me. I like that. So let's see what we got. We got this, and we got this. One more thing. I'm going to do one thing, actually. I forgot to do something. Remove that. Bear with me. I don't hear any clicking, so I know you guys aren't following along. You guys are tired. I forgot to do processing extent, same as display. That's what I want to do. good. That's what I wanted. I'm going to go to Layout View. I'm going to set up a paper space. I'm just going to make it a square paper space. I'm not going to print this map. I'm just going to, all I want to do is I want to bring this into to Rhino. I'm going to set the bookmark to shot chart. Actually, I want it to fill the page, so I'm just going to zoom in like that. Perfect. Save. And then I'm going to set that bookmark, call this layout. Now we're going to export this image. Actually, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to turn on the court, basketball court line here. I'm going to export that map as a JPEG. JPEG. I'll call this LeBron reference. I'm going to turn off that court line. Export map. LeBron heat map. Save. Take this guy, export map, LeBron color map. We need 3 maps before we get into here. You're thinking, oh my God, Rhino. It's Rhino. All right. So in Rhino, I have a basketball court set up. Why? Because I want to bring in that reference map, this reference right here. I'm just going to use, oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys know the picture frame tool. I believe it's in the surface option tool in Rhino here, and there's a little option here. Yeah, picture frame right there. This allows you to bring in a surface with a image draped on as a texture on it. This is extremely useful for what I'm going to show in a second. What I most want is this. I want this length here, and I want this length here. That is going to help me with the grasshopper part. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it. I'm going to use this court line here to scale it to fit this court here, because I want my diagram to be at the right scale. So I'm just going to scale it to match that. So let's see. Is it this line here? Like that. So now this image lines up perfectly and is at the right scale of my court here. And this court is actually at the right size of an NBA basketball court. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer, put this map on that layer, change object layer, turn it off, turn it on, court's on that layer. Let's open Grasshopper. Grasshopper. All right, so Grasshopper's open, Rhino's open. I have everything I need to start the magic. In Grasshopper, click on the surface component and set that surface that you brought in right there like that. I'm going to turn it off because I don't need to look at it. Now what we need to do is we need to figure a way to take the surface and divide it into a certain number of points to create the effect that we want. I'm going to choose to divide it into hexes because I want that hexagonal look that Kirk Goldsberry did for his maps. I want to copy him. So what you do is you take the Hex Grid option in the, which tab is this? The vector tab here. You could also use, if you have Lunchbox installed, you can use the Lunchbox hexagonal cells option, but that's a plugin you have to download. This is not a plugin, this is built into Grasshopper already. Plug in that to there, and then simply set the range to fill out this square here. I'm going to set the cell size to maybe something like 0.75 to make it a bit smaller. And then I'm just going to plug in a slider and make that fit that map. Do it for the other direction as well. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to kind of fit. That's good enough for me. Now what we need to do is we need to take this point here, these points at grid centers. This P is a point. If we put in a point component, point. Grasshopper hates me. Let's do this. Bring in a point component. You see that every single cell size has a center point, and that's represented by this point right here. We need to find the intersection of this surface and that point. The easiest way to do that is type in something called SLX. SLX. Surface line intersection. What you need to do is you need to take this point here, type in line SDL to create a vertical line from that point, like that. Then plug in this line into the L, then plug in the surface to this. If I turn off everything else, what you see is now the points only read where it actually intersected with that surface there. And this is important because we want this little item here, the UV value. If I plug in a panel there, you can see what this is. It essentially is a set of coordinates on that surface of where that point is located. So 0, 0, 0 is that corner right there, and everything in the middle is you know, whatever the coordinate is. What we need to do is we need to do something called reparameterizing this surface. So you can reparameterize it by right-clicking on the S and clicking here, or you can just reparameterize the surface straight up in the original component by clicking the reparameterize button right there. What does this mean? In the primitives tab of Grasshopper, there's this little thing called MD slider. And this is just demoing, demoing what the point of the UV component is. And then type in evaluate surface, plug in the surface to the S, and then plug in the UV to this here. If you move that slider around, you see that what it's doing is essentially it's finding a point on that surface with this coordinate, 0.84, 0.84. If you put it to the corner there, 1, 1, what this basically is from this point to that point, 1 in the X direction and 1 in the Y direction. What reparameterizing does, if I reparameterize the surface, is it resets the entire domain of the surface to be from 0 to 1. So now what you see is if I move this point around, actually you can actually get every single corner of the surface, like that. This is extremely important for when you plug this into what is known as the image sampler. So this is reparameterized right here, right? These numbers here in the UV right here now are always going to have a coordinate or essentially a point that has a range between 0 and 1 for both the X, Y, and Z numbers here. Type in image sampler. This allows you to bring in an image, if you double click on the little square there, and we're going to bring in the first LeBron James heat map, this one right here. And you see the X domain and the Y domain is from 0 to 1 and 0 to 1. By reparameterizing the surface, we can just leave this as is and it'll work perfectly because it'll recognize the parameter from 0 to 1 and 0 to 1. And because we know the dimensions of this surface in pixels are the same as the dimensions for the other images, this should work perfectly. So plug in the UV value there, and what you get is going to be a series of numbers. Actually, sorry. What you need to do one more thing is you need to make the image sampler read the dark and white value by clicking on the color brightness option here. And now what's going to do is it's essentially going to give you one number from 0 to 1 that represents the color brightness. And if you know anything about anything, that 1 to 0 is a percentage that you can use to scale these cells. Type in scale. Before I do anything else, I'm going to check the tree structures of every single element that I'm going to plug in here to make sure they match. So this tree structure here is grafted. Every branch has one item. The tree structure here is not grafted. So we need to graft this tree, this here. So you see this now, if I plug in this matches that tree structure. Whenever you start combining information, you always want to make sure the tree structures are identical, otherwise Grasshopper is going to crash, which is why everyone hates Grasshopper, because they don't know how to manage lists and they don't know how to manage trees. As I say every time I teach Grasshopper, this here is the secret to mastering Grasshopper. It's just this simple understanding of how to manage lists and trees. We also need to graph the points. These points are not grafted as well, so I'm just going to type in graphed like that. So now we're ready to go. Plug in your cells to the geometry for the geometry you want to scale. Plug in the points for the center of scaling, and plug in this number here to that. Now if you look at what we have, let's hide this image here. That is LeBron James. LeBron James, let me turn this off here. LeBron James's heat map. This is the exact same thing as this here, but now it looks cool. What you can do is you can also play with the range of this scale here. So let's say you want to take these numbers here and you want to scale these numbers up so that these aren't so small. You can remap the numbers by typing in remap. What remap does is it takes the value that these numbers here, and it just basically resets the domain to what you want it to be. Because we reparameterize the surface, the domain of these numbers is 0 to 1. So it defaults already to the source domain to 0 to 1. So we don't have to do anything here. We just need to change the target domain. Let's make it something like 0, actually no, 0.5 to 1. Now let's plug in these remap values to the scale function here. Maybe that's a bit too dramatic. Maybe let's make it 0.2 to 1. Maybe let's make it 0.2 to 1.1. So make these overlap a bit more to kind of show that these are really dense. So you can play with this range here, but essentially what you have here is the hex grid that represents this heat map here. Now you can do fun things with this. If we go into perspective view, you can see what you got is you got this representation of the LeBron James heat map, but you can use this number for many different things. Let's say you want to give it a bit of a hill, where these up here kind of look like a mountain. These look like a smaller mountain. These are just flat. You can move these values using that same exact numerical function up here. So let's see, plug in the geometry to the G, plug in the Z, take these numbers here, do that. You see what that gives you is kind of like this 3D look to that map. And you can also obviously just adjust the range of numbers here. Let's say you want to take this range here, let's copy it. We want to give a custom range to this scale factor here. This part's not going to make any sense because I'm copying a bunch of things together. But let's say I want to make it from 0 to 3 to give it a bit more of a intense look. Okay, so now you have your heat map. Let's put colors onto it. Why? That's what the color map is for. Let's move these out of the way for a second. Copy and paste your image sampler. Double click on that. Go to the LeBron color map here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use this first option, the RGBA colors. Okay. And now it's going to, at each UV value, sample the color that represents there. Now we can just use this color map to color this. The easiest way to do it is just use the custom preview option right here. So what you do is you plug in the G to the geometry. And I believe this is grafted, so it should be fine. Let me just double check. Yeah. So you should be plug this in there like that. And that's the, now it's because the background is like gray, you can't really see it. Let me just do the background color. Bless you. Change the background color. Wireframe, background, solid color. Bless you. So again, see now it's beginning to look like something. But now you're thinking to yourself, yeah, Frank, that's cool, but I want these to be filled, right? When I bring this to Illustrator, I want this to have a solid hatch. Okay, fine, guys. If that's what you want, fine. Jeez, all right. I'm only human here. God. What I recommend if you want to do that is to download a tool called Human. It's a plugin called, man, I'm diving into Grasshopper like way deeper than you guys need to know about. There's a plugin in Grasshopper called Human, and if you don't know where to download plugins for Grasshopper, then you're not even ready to use Grasshopper. So I'm kidding. You got to go to this website called Food for Rhino, foodforrhino.com. And in here you can find all the plugins for Grasshopper. So type in this one called Human, right here, Human. This is my favorite plugin for Grasshopper. Basically what you can do is you can bake hatches. So this little option called Create Hatch. I'm going to really quickly make this option here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this color here. I'm going to plug into the attribute color option here like that. I'm going to create a layer, layer 1. I'm going to copy that layer name, paste it in here like that, in the text layer there like that. I'm going fast enough for you guys. Great, good. Plug that into the attributes, the ATT, into the attributes tab right here like that. Plug in the geometry to this tab right there. You see the hatches are, you don't see the color yet because I haven't baked it yet. So we just need to bake it. So in the bake button here, let's just put a button to make it true or false. So plug in the button there, click bake, and well, I swear when I did it at home it worked. But even I, Frank the Grasshopper Master, gets lost here and there occasionally. I will figure this out later. But regardless, you have this, which is great enough for the purposes that we need to do for this tutorial. What you can also do, let me do a shaded viewport or something. You can also just use the custom preview option right here. Put in the color like that. And then you can just use the print this using the layout tab like this. If you just print this, it should just be able to like bring in the hexes, but this looks weird for some reason. So I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to bake the geometry with attributes with the color set here. The layers set as, here's my layers tab. Oh, I lost my layers tab. Oh, here it is. Bake geometry, geometry to bake, true, bake. And that worked, but I'm not sure why the hatches didn't work. Basically, it's hard to tell, but I actually baked those curves with the color on it. And now basically, if this is not the ideal way to do it, but you can just take this and you can export this PDF into Illustrator, then you can just like reverse the hexagonal colors to represent that drawing. Okay, I've